Hi everyone, it's Mithrilda and welcome back to my journey of learning to draw. Right now, I'm going through an online art fundamentals course called Evolve Artist. If you want to see my progress up to now through Evolve Artist, or my entire art journey from the very beginning, links to those playlists are up in the cards. So getting right into things, the lesson videos before homework 7 were an hour and 7 minutes long, and that really made me want to procrastinate, but I managed to push myself and I got through them. So in homeworks 1 through 6, we're doing colored lights and still using the grayscale for the shadows, and now we're moving into doing colored shadows as well. In addition to the colored shadows, we're also adding in gradients to blend the lights and the shadows together. Interestingly, the technique we're using to make those colored shadows is adding black to the color that we mix for the light. My eyes pretty much popped out of my head when we got to that point in the videos. And Kevin even addresses it. He says, quote, "Probably any one of you who has taken an art class is probably cringing at the idea of adding black to make shadows because you've probably been told you don't add black. Well, I'm here to tell you that's nonsense." And so yeah, we're taking the light color, adding black until we get the value of the shadow, blending it all together with a gradient, easy peasy, right? Well, also in the lessons, he talks about how sometimes he holds his breath when he needs to do a really straight line, and for some reason that made me feel like a lot better about myself. For some reason, as a beginner artist, I have so many ideas of what's cheating and what isn't cheating, and in my heart, somewhere deep inside, I felt like holding my breath was cheating because, oh, I should be able to do it perfectly without doing weird things like that. I don't know. When I say it out loud, I realize how weird it sounds and how unreasonable it is, but in my head, it kind of made sense. I really don't know why, but there is so much yellow in these paintings, and it's driving me absolutely nuts. If you look back through the first 6 paintings, every single one of them has a yellow object in it. So I was like, enough. For the rest of the paintings that I can pick the subjects for, absolutely no more yellow objects. But then I realized that yellow is everywhere. For every painting, the tabletop and the background, or the cardboard of the shadow box all have browns that are full of yellow. The yellow always gets contaminated so easily, and if I add a bit too much of the other colors, I need to lay out even more yellow paint to bring it back. I've used so much yellow paint. I don't even know if it's gonna last through the end of Evolve Artist, if I'm being super honest, but I'll let you know if I do end up running out. For homework 7, I was really excited to do the gradients with the shadows and everything because it was all getting so close to finished color paintings. Unfortunately, I didn't get the best feedback on this homework. The grader pointed out that the shadow values were off, mostly in the too dark direction, and now that it's pointed out, I can see it. As I was mixing, I was having a really hard time figuring out how light or dark to make those shadows, since I couldn't even compare my paint to the picture since I knew it wouldn't match perfectly since we're just adding black, right? So there's no way the colors will match exactly. And for some reason, I just couldn't convert the values in my head between them properly. I also got feedback that my gradients were too thin to accurately describe the shape of the object, which I can definitely see, and that some of my colors were a bit off. But he did say that my edges, paint density, and brushwork were good. For homework 8, I was really confused since no matter how much I looked back and forth, the light on the salt was darker than some of the shadows, and I was kind of having a crisis on what to do. Piper was able to clear that up for me within her critique by reminding me that what we're doing now is not matching reality or a picture, but rather performing an exercise within the rules that every light is lighter than every shadow, so it's okay to push things a bit value-wise to fit within that framework. And she was even nice enough to draw me a little diagram of a way that I could have made it work. Homework 9, I got the feedback that my gradients were still too thin and there was some paint density issues within the piece. That's something I've been struggling with a lot because I never mix enough paint for some reason. I'm always afraid that I'll mix too much and waste the paint, so I've been erring on the side of mixing too little, which really is not the right move because the only solution when I run out is either to water it down with a lot of oil, which makes it streaky, and this also results in me making my gradients really thin because I just don't have enough paint to mix more mid-tone and blend it out. And I've had to leave mistakes in the painting that I knew I could fix if only I had more paint. Overall, I've really been shooting myself in the foot by both not mixing enough paint in the first place and being too lazy to mix more when I realize I need it. Well, not too lazy necessarily, but just not having enough time at the end of the day to go through the whole process of remixing every color that I need. You think after 8 straight paintings of not having enough paint I would learn my lesson, but no, never. I felt really heartbroken over it, especially when I looked at the other student examples of this homework and how glorious it would have looked with the wider gradients. Also, when I was trying to blend out the gradient on the apple, it turns out that when the paint is too thin, it's so hard to blend. I don't really know how to describe it if you haven't gone through the experience of trying to blend it yourself, but just every stroke I made was overwriting the thin paint that was already on the canvas. I also got the feedback that the shadow values were off again, so that seems to be an ongoing problem for me. At the beginning of homework 10, there was a sort of mid-block check-in and a short video from Piper reiterating some of the core skills we were trying to practice and master, and encouraging us to reach out if we were still confused about any of them. She also super reiterated that we're not matching the photos exactly with regard to value right now, but that the limited value training wheels are on and need to stay on until the end of block 3, at which point we would have learned to see values at a high enough level that we can take them off. I feel like that's one of the most common questions I get and that I see about the Evolve curriculum. People will say that it doesn't match the photo. Well, right now we're just trying to make a painting that makes sense. Later on, we can match photos exactly. We can add creativity and aesthetics. But that's not the focus of these exercises at the moment. On homework 10, I really gave it my all and mixed way more paint than I thought I needed just to see how it would turn out. I felt like if I'm chronically underestimating the amount of paint I need, I should just try to mix what I think is more than enough, then decrease that amount if it's too much. In the end, I really did need the majority of it, especially the light blue color. I mixed a ton, so much that it was getting hard to mix with a palette knife, but I used up every drop of it. Looking back, I realized that there were so many little mistakes in the painting that I would not have bothered to mix up more paint to fix if I didn't already have it on my palette, but that improved the overall quality of the painting so much. Overall, I think I have a much better grasp of how much paint I'll need to mix up in the future, which is way more than I'd previously thought. Unfortunately, I didn't really get to try out making a gradient because I didn't think about it when I was choosing my still life subject, and it just didn't really have that many gradients in it. For this piece, I got the feedback that my ellipses were a bit wonky, some of my sharp edges had gotten a bit soft, and that there were some places with excess paint buildup. At first, I was a bit confused about that last point, but then I remembered how because of the sketches and paint that I've been doing, they were leaving lots of oil on the canvas and thinning out the paint way more than I had intended, and even causing the paint to bleed at the edges sometimes, which is probably contributing to the softer edges than intended as well. I happened to be chatting with Kevin shortly after this exercise, so I asked him, what do I do if my canvas is all oily and it dilutes the paint and makes it run? And he was like, what? Why is your canvas oily? You're only supposed to be basically dry brushing it onto the canvas and scribbling in general shapes rather than trying to make line art. And if you do pick up too much paint, you want to wipe the excess oil off the canvas immediately. And I was like, oops. That explains a lot about my painting struggles lately. Now that he said it, I do remember him telling me all this before. I guess it just fell out of my brain. I also asked him how to properly match the value of the shadows. He asked me if I could properly match the lights, and I was like, yeah, pretty well now, actually. And then he told me to look at the relationship between the light and the shadow in the still life, and ask myself if that same relationship exists between the light and the shadow on my palette. And definitely to not bring up the palette knife and try to compare the color on the knife to the color in the box, because that's just a crutch. The skill we're trying to develop is the instinctual feeling of whether or not all the relationships within the painting are correct, not if we can mix one particular color in front of us perfectly. He also said that a huge part of painting is confidence, and that the Evolve program is designed to give you the confidence to start getting bolder and experimenting with your technique when you have the foundation solid. That's why we're trying to get rid of any tools, methods, and crutches as soon as possible. And he said that the way we're learning to paint right now is slow, methodical, and tedious, but necessary in order to learn. And he says that in Block 6, you learn an entirely new technique that builds on the stuff you learn here, but it's way faster and easier, and you'll never use this particular technique again. I thought that's super interesting, and I'm really looking forward to how that's going to be. I know I keep bringing this up, but like Bolin CK said, learning the thing doesn't always look like the thing that you're trying to learn. I hope that going through this course will finally solidify this in my head, and I'll stop second guessing the things that people recommend to me just because it doesn't look exactly like what I think learning something should look like. Maybe not, but I can hope. In the end, Homework 7 took 6 hours and 28 minutes, Homework 8 took 4 hours and 3 minutes, Homework 9 took 4 hours and 18 minutes, and Homework 10 took 5 hours and 20 minutes. I'm really excited to utilize what I've learned about mixing enough paint, sketching onto the canvas properly, and finding those shadow values, as well as get into reflections and highlights. Just one more step until I can get into full, complete paintings. I also might start experimenting with how to preserve my paint so I can do one of these color paintings over 2 days. All of my Block 3 homeworks so far have been completed over 1 day, which definitely contributes to me constantly running out of time and also not completing as many homework assignments as I'd like to, because it's pretty hard to find days where I can just paint for 6 hours straight. I've just been so scared of wasting paint and also wasting all the effort I put into mixing these colors if I preserve it wrong and I let it dry out over a day. However, the paintings have been getting really long and I'm like running out of days to work on them, so that might force my hand soon to really figure out how to work on something over multiple days. I'll let you all know how all of this stuff goes. If you'd like to keep following me on my art journey, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching and stay safe and healthy out there. Remember that talent is a myth. Now, get back to work.